how are we going to pay for all of this if whoever it is that's sick runs out of money of their own? Is the government going to pay for it? Is Medicare going to pay for it? Am I going to have to put my own money on the table?
Welcome to Midland Money Mindset, your weekly dose of inspiration and insights to ensure you enjoy each step of your journey. Whether you're saving for the future, planning your next big adventure, or simply looking to add more joy to your life, you've come to the right place. Now, let's dive in.
Too many families face the heartbreaking stress of managing a parent's finances without a roadmap, confused, overwhelmed, and unsure where to turn. Beth Pinsker knows that pain intimately, a nationally recognized financial columnist and certified financial planner. Beth became her mother's financial caregiver, and it changed everything. In this episode, she shares the deeply personal story behind her book, My Mother's Money, and reveals a powerful vision, a world where families can approach caregiving with confidence, clarity, and compassion. If you're caring for a loved one or simply planning ahead, this conversation could change how you navigate life's most difficult transitions. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into today's show. Well, we are super excited today to have Beth Pinsker, nationally recognized financial columnist at MarketWatch and certified financial planner. And I am so excited to share her story. Welcome to the show, Beth.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. We're kind of reversing the roles because I've been involved in some of your articles over time, and I'm really excited. We'll be talking about your book and everything you're up to today. But before we dive in there, can you share with our listeners, because they're always fascinated by our guests and their journeys of how they ended up or got to where they are. So can you share, how did you end up being a nationally recognized financial columnist with MarketWatch and, your writing and your covering of the financial services profession?
There was no path to come here. It was
That's very common, by the way.
Yeah. Nobody understands my career path, and certainly not me. I started out as a film critic, and I worked as an entertainment journalist, and I worked for TV shows and newspapers and trade publications, hung out with movie stars and went to film festivals and did all of that stuff. And then slowly over time, I started to cover the business of making entertainment. And that led me somehow down a path to personal finance. And that is where my passion kicked in. And I just loved it. It just suited me. And I started to run a personal finance website called Wallet Pop, which launched right in 2008 in the middle of the Great Recession. And we covered all aspects of frugality and money saving, and it became my core subject matter. And then I moved on to Reuters as a personal finance editor and columnist. And the opportunity came up to get my certified financial planning designation because they changed the work requirements so that journalists could qualify for the mark of CFP. So a lot of journalists like Christine Benz studied for the CFP, but did it at a time when they weren't allowing that. And so you could do all the work and then not get the little letters after your name. And they changed the rules when I was doing it, and you could get the letters after your name. So I went through the program mostly to better myself as a journalist. I really wanted to know what I was writing about and talking about and the nuances of it. So when I talked to somebody like you, I could understand what you were saying, and I could know the next intelligent question to ask you, because a lot of what you deal with in the personal finance world is a what if situation. And 99% of the time, the answer is, oh, it depends. Should I take Social Security early? I don't know. It depends. It depends how old you are. It depends how much money you have. And if you don't know those what if questions to ask, you're missing out on a lot of the puzzle. So I wanted to know all of those things. And the CFP is a very broad program. So you learn estate planning and you learn insurance and all of those things. And it's been really helpful to me as a journalist to have that basis of knowledge to work from in order to then ask deeper questions and go deeper and see more things in the data that are out there.
Did you have this love of finance, personal finance, before going down this path that you've gone on? Or was it something you just found organically along the way?
Yeah, I didn't know. But when I was writing my book is called My Mother's Money, and it's about my journey taking care of my mother's finances when she got sick. And then I don't want to give any spoiler alerts, but after she passed away, I had to close out her estate, which is one of the more difficult tasks in life, emotionally and intellectually. Like, that's just a really hard thing to do functionally, besides the grief that you're going through. And I realized that most of my love for writing came from my father, who was an English professor. And my mother took care of all the finances in the household and was constantly fighting with the IRS. We got audited 3 times when I was growing up.
Wow.
And my mom just fought with them, and she never lost an audit. She would take over the dining room table every year at tax time. And, my father wrote, and he was an English professor. And so he had a lot of freelance income and a home office and all the sorts of complicated deductions that drive accountants crazy. And she had receipts for everything. And she would go to these audits with all of her documentation. And she would come back with the government having owed her money. And that is the spirit I had to go into taking care of my mom with. Like, she would stand for no less than perfection and absolutely having every detail buttoned up with her money. And I needed to do right by her with that. And nothing I learned in my CFP classes or my decades of reporting on this industry, nothing prepared me for that. There's just no rule book out there for what it feels like to go through that and all the pitfalls and obstacles you run into and how to get over them. And it was really hard. And so when I was at MarketWatch, I just started my job when my mom first got sick. My job was to be a retirement columnist and write about these sorts of things.
Right.
And so I wrote columns about the hardest things that I faced, and they were really popular. People really need this information. So when I got towards the end of it, I was able to pull that together into a book proposal and pull all of that material that I gained over the course of like a year and a half and pull it together into a book with their expert interviews and interviews with other caregivers and all sorts of resources and help. And there's a workbook at the back. So like, you can really get a full life cycle of what it feels like to have to take care of somebody in your life and like step into their finances.
Yeah. Let's talk about the CFP for a second, because I think that's an interesting thing, because a lot of journalists are not CFPs who are in the, financial services, financial reporting area. And I think that's a huge differentiator for yourself. And it's clear that you learned a lot more, in the day-to-day from working with, and through your mom's situation than perhaps you did with regard to the CFP. But, you said in your own words, the CFP was really a baseline for you so that you could have deeper conversations as you were doing this reporting. So, is this something that you would highly recommend and encourage for other people who are reporting in the financial space?
I talk to a lot of journalists who ask me that same question. And the answer is, if you have the time and the temperament to do it, it's a great thing. Really, the advice I give to any young journalist is learn a subject matter. People need help digesting what's going on in the world. And so if you're going to write about something and try to explain things to people, then you should really understand the core of what it's about. And if you're writing about finances in any practical way, you should study the system that we have and all the tools and that are available to people and all the ways that those tools interact with the financial system in this country. It gets more and more complicated by the day. And you miss out on a lot if you don't know the mechanics of it. If you don't know which way the yield curve goes when it's good and when it's bad, like, you need to know these things. I thought when you started this conversation, I thought you were going to ask me CFP questions. I was like, the details of it probably flew out of my head a long time ago. But I'll say this, when I took the test, the key things I remember is there was a question on the test I remember from my reporting that was never in any flashcard or anything that I studied. And it was like, how long can you miss a student loan payment before you go into default? And We had written an article about that. So I knew the answer, but I didn't know that because of my studies in the book,
Right.
So things come up in life that aren't in books. And what helped me the most in my life with having the CFP and dealing with my mom was that nagging insecurity that everybody has, that they're going to run out of money before they die.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? I mean, I think that when you get into a caregiving situation, that is the biggest fear that everybody has. How are we going to pay for all of this? And, what's going to happen if whoever it is that's sick runs out of money of their own? Is the government going to pay for it? Is Medicare going to pay for it? Am I going to have to put my own money on the table to pay for a caregiver? And I could look at my mom's finances. I could look at her bank accounts once I got into them. I could run the numbers myself because I have a financial calculator and I know how to use the software, and I could see exactly how much time we had with the money that she had before we'd have to start thinking about other things.
Yeah. Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool. It's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to Mitlin.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together, starting today. Let's talk about what you said a few moments ago about if you're going to be a journalist, your advice was to have an expertise and become an expert in that given area. And one of the things you describe yourself as from your experiences is as a financial caregiving expert. So for people who may not understand or know what that is or means, can you share what that means to you?
Sure. Financial caregiving, as I describe it, is stepping into somebody else's financial shoes and taking over their finances. So, like, for instance, my mom got sick and she didn't have anybody to pay her bills, manage sending in the reimbursement receipts to the long-term care insurance, deal with Medicare, deal with Social Security. She needed somebody to handle all of those things for her. And at the moment that she needed them, she was too sick to write out an instruction manual. So I had to go in there like a forensic accountant and figure that stuff out for myself. And it's like the hardest thing I have ever had to do. It's really hard. Think about, the stumbling blocks that most people have filing their own taxes, right? Like you think, I need to know where my mortgage interest statement is, but it's your house.
Right.
So if you can't find it and you don't know where the mail, where the mail got to, you can call them up and get it. If it's your mother, you can't. You don't know where her mortgage statement is or which address it got sent to. And if you call them up, they won't talk to you. So you need to have the right plans in place to make sure that when the time comes, they will accept your power of attorney or whatever documents you have in order to access the account, get the mortgage interest statement you need, file the right form with the government so that you can file somebody else's taxes for them, and then put through all that paperwork. And it's really a lot of steps, and they're not detailed anywhere. So you just sort of stumble through them. Well, they're not detailed until now because they're in my book.
Right. Let's talk about your book called My Mother's Money. What do you hope that readers will take away from reading the book, which I believe you had published by Penguin Random House, right?
Yes, it's an imprint of Penguin Random House called Crown Currency. And what I wanted to do is give people a full sense of what all of this entails so they would understand the why of the importance of planning. And if you don't feel it like that, if you don't feel it from a story or feel it from an experience that you've had, you often just get little bits of information in your head and you end up Googling what you need when you come across it. Like, oh, all of a sudden we need power of attorney. I'm going to Google power of attorney. And you're not going to understand that you also need a healthcare proxy, probably at the same time as you need a power of attorney, but none of the articles are going to tell you that. So my book puts together an entire life cycle of events in a story, which is my story, like a memoir of what I went through and each little bit as I needed it. And you can follow it as a story if you're not ready for to-do lists, or you can glean the information in the workbook or the sidebars will tell you everything you need to know at each step of the way. But a lot of people aren't ready for that. A lot of people aren't ready to think about it until it's too late. And what I'm trying to do is catch people beforehand so they can understand, oh my gosh, I have a parent who's aging. We have to do something about this. And oh, look, here's all the things I need to do really easily laid out on a piece of paper.
Right.
That these seem manageable. Download a document from the internet. I can do that.
Yeah. So much easier addressing these things from a sense of you have time and you're not in crisis mode versus doing that in crisis mode. It becomes far more challenging. So I think that the readers, if they take away that mere fact and just simply get some of those building blocks in place for themselves, for lack of a better word, it's going to make their life so much easier as they approach that aging parent over time. I love what you've done here. And, the book is going to be and is a fantastic tool for people who may not even be experiencing this yet, but they have aging parents. It's time to read the book and start acting on it because it's going to make your life tremendously easier at some point.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears for a minute because we have a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs that listen to the show. And we talk about media. And I think media is such a powerful medium when it comes to brand building. It's a key component. What advice do you have as somebody in the media for those who want to be quoted or have story ideas that they want to pitch to a reporter? What do you have to share for them?
Be specific is my keyword that I always tell people. I get a lot of pitches. My inbox is completely full every day with people being pitched to me for various things. I write one story at a time. Actually, I write 3 stories at a time or 4 stories at a time usually. Mm-hmm. And, I'm always on deadline and I'm always looking for the right person for the right story at that particular moment. And that might not be you right this second, but my inbox has a search function. Mm-hmm. And I've been telling people this for years. If you are very specific in your pitches, then 9 times out of 10, a journalist will be thinking, oh, I am writing a story on interest rates. And you go to your inbox and you type in interest rates and you see all the pitches that you've gotten of people who can comment on interest rates. And whatever it is, small business succession, small business taxes, I put those keywords when I'm writing a story. Mm-hmm. If you can raise to the level of having some kind of data to offer, then that usually gets my attention too. Because I am always trying to get out ahead of things rather than follow behind them. So if you have data from your users of your business or your clientele that you've aggregated blindly, that to me is the currency that I traffic in. Yeah. And so if you have something to offer that's interesting, you can write that in a pitch. And if it rises to the level of news, then me or somebody like me would bite on that.
Yeah. And I would add, as somebody who works with the media quite often, being responsive is very important because as you said, you're on deadline all the time. I mean, I've literally taken calls with reporters from gondolas during Christmas vacation because I wanted to make sure I got back to them. And I think probably the most memorable one and maybe funny one at the same time was a couple of summers ago. I was about to go in for an appendectomy. And before I did, I was on the phone with a reporter because they had reached out to me for comment. So I think that if you use those 2 things, like you said, be very specific and don't get discouraged if it's not picked up and you don't have an interest today or the reporter doesn't have an interest today, because it could come back, it sounds like months or maybe even a year later that you're writing a story and it just might be timely that you had sent in that information and now that's time for you to write it and you need some help or you're looking for comments, right?
Absolutely. That always just, be patient because news comes around constantly and you never know when it's going to happen, but reporters work off the news. And so whatever you're pitching might not be the news of the day, but it could be the news of tomorrow. You never know.
All right. Agreed. As somebody like yourself who's been in the financial media space for, some time now, how have you seen the landscape change, from your point of view?
Well, it's been a tremendous evolution just in terms of the access that people have to data and information and the speed at which they want it. It makes us constantly have to work to stay ahead of the curve and to be able to explain things to people. The tax bill has so many different elements to it, but you sort of have to go one by one, and they're going to emerge as they do when there's clarifications and things like that as they come along. And details just change all the time, and the economic system changes all the time, and the situations change. And that's what we try to do the most, is just try to explain things to people as they're happening, but before they've even thought of the question.
Now, I want to say, I'm going to preface this question that I wanted to ask you. Over the years, you've written many stories. What is the story, or maybe there's a couple of stories that you're most proud of, I guess? And I'll clarify that by saying, aside from the one that you've written about your mother, in this book, because I'm sure that's been hugely impactful to you in your life. But aside from that story, what one or two other stories have really made an impact on you during your career in this medium?
Well, there's one that I mentioned in the book, actually. I had written a story about, the headline was something like, "What should be in your death file?" And it was a story I wrote for Reuters before I even started the CFP. It was back in 2014. And this man, his father had died, and he thought everything was going to be a huge mess. So he went to his house and he turned on his computer and he thought, what am I going to do with all this stuff? I don't know where anything is. And on the desktop, it's a Microsoft Word, there's a little folder, looks like a file tab, and it says death.
Oh, boy.
And he double clicks on the folder, and everything he needed was in there. His father's military discharge, a copy of his birth certificate, instructions for where to find other things, his financial statements. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. And so the story listed what should be in your death file. And my mom told me that she was reading her local paper in Florida one day, and she came across this article, and she liked to clip things out of the newspaper, like old people do. And she would send me clips from time to time. She'd gotten out the scissors to cut out this article, because it was a great article about estate planning that she thought I should read. And she starts to cut it, and she realizes that I wrote it. Because, Reuters is a news service, and our stuff gets syndicated everywhere. So my stuff was syndicated to her local paper. And she was so moved by it, she was literally cutting it out to send to me. And I think I'm most proud of that, because I piqued her interest without her even knowing that I wrote it.
Right.
Because my mother reads everything that you write regardless.
And she loves it, right?
Yeah. And she was interested in it and was going to talk to me about it and didn't even know that I had written it. So that to me was one of my most proud moments.
Amazing. Quite the story. So if there are journalists or people that have a propensity to write, they really enjoy that, right? We talk a lot about joy on here, and or they're going down the route of being a journalist. What advice do you have for aspiring journalists?
Have an emergency fund. It's not the highest paying profession, and there's a lot of layoffs. I've been laid off a lot of times in my career. I've had more jobs than the average person. You move around, you learn things from each place that you go. And if you really love it, it's the greatest thing in the world. I love it. I couldn't think of doing anything else. And it's great to be able to do it. And it's something that you can do forever, because journalists don't retire because we're poor. So you need to have the fortitude to withstand a lot of shocks. Yes, an emergency fund. Because if you're a freelance journalist, one thing is that the checks never come. You write a piece, and then 6 months later, the check will randomly arrive. Right. So you just need to work on those basics of financial planning before you start a career like this, because it's not going to be a steady corporate ladder that you just go up and up and up.
It sounds like you really need to love what you're doing too, as a rewarding factor as well. It sounds like
you should love what you're doing anyway. I tell my kids that all the time.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
If you love what you do, then you've picked the right path. And if you don't, you should keep searching.
Right.
That's all. everybody should love what they do.
I agree with you 1,000%, Beth. And that leads us into the last and final question that we ask each of our guests on the Midland Money Mindset, because we are all about joy on this show. And that is, Beth, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
I walked my dog with my kids. We have this dog, and the dog is a pack animal and has anxiety, and like the rest of the family. You know how the dog always ends up like the rest of you? And the dog has anxiety and will not walk with just one person. And I think she does this to like make us be a family. And when my kids were little, I would make them take turns because they would always complain and whine about having to go out and walk the dog. And so they would alternate days. And they're older now, and, you know, one's off at college half the time, and they were both around today, and they wanted to go on a dog walk. So I said, the dog needs to be walked, and they both jumped up, and we all went to walk the dog together as a family. And to me, like the fact that they want to do that now, and we chit-chat the whole dog walk, and everybody has a good time, and we all connect for a minute, that to me is what this is all about. So that brought me happiness.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds like it would bring you a lot of joy and something that really, kicks the day off really on the right foot. So, Beth, we're going to have all of your information in the show notes. We'll have links out to the book, My Mother's Money, which is published by Penguin Random House. We're really excited for this to get out there and your story to be shared with the world. And if people want to learn more about the book or learn more about you or connect with you, we will have all your contact information there. But what's the easiest and the best way for them to reach out and connect?
BethPinsker.com. I have a website that's just my name, and it has all the information for buying the book, for my Market Watch columns, my social media, everything. It's just everything out there about me is just my name.
Great. Nice and easy. Go to BethPinsker.com. You can learn about the book and everything else she's up to. I really appreciate you taking out the time, spending it with us today, Beth, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Beth, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and heart. What you've given us today goes far beyond financial advice. It's a reminder that caregiving is one of the greatest acts of love. My Mother's Money is going to be a lifeline for so many, and this conversation is one that our listeners won't forget. These are the stories that stay with us and shape how we show up for the ones we love. Beth Pinsker and all she is up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Midland Money Mindset. Remember, it's not just about the money, it's finding joy in the journey and embracing the right mindset. If you love the show, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Don't forget to follow along for more tips and inspiration. Please visit the social links below to connect with Larry or his guests. Until next time, keep smiling, keep thriving, and remember to think about, what did you do today that brought you joy?
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.